Academica Media. From Academica Media Studios in Miami, Florida, it's Big Ideas in Education, a weekly recap of inspiration and innovation in your schools.
Hello, education lovers. Welcome to the show. Excited to have you here this week on our installment of Big Ideas in Education. I'm Ryan Kairalla from Doral College, joined by Dr. Sarah Boulos from Somerset Academy Schools. Hi, Sarah. How are you?
Hi, Ryan. I'm doing well. How about yourself?
Doing great. Great stories this week. I'm excited to get right into them. What do you have for us?
Well, everybody knows right now that teachers are in extremely high demand, and we know that high-need areas are in even more demand as schools try to fill positions. So one California school network decided to tap into a resource that was right in front of them by providing the funds to get their staff properly credentialed to serve an extremely vulnerable population, students with special needs. Aspire Charter School's Senior Special Education Director, Lisa Fracaro, said, "I've seen this across systems, not just Aspire, where we have these great educators in our schools who just need support in accessing credential programs. They're invested in our schools. They want to work with our kids. They want to work in special education." Aspire's Education Specialist Intern Sponsorship Program creates a pipeline of school volunteers and classroom aides already in the door, like Fracaro said, providing a pathway for uncredentialed staff, predominantly Black and Latino adults, who also reflect the network's 15,000 students, to stay within the school community. The program is actually in its third year and has some amazing testimonials from staff who said they had been saving up for years to be able to afford coursework and credentialing programs. And programs such as the Aspire one make that a reality in a time when we don't really have a lot of room for waiting. I'm really excited about programs like this. And I know I've mentioned other programs, like a few months ago, we were talking about a program in Alabama tapping into teachers' aides and paraprofessionals and helping them to go through their coursework. And I think that we're going to see more, well, hopefully we're going to see more and more of this because it really is a great resource in the sense that you have people who are really invested in education and who generally know the students and know the community. But we're also in a very serious situation where teachers are leaving the field even in higher numbers than they were before. And it is really a nationwide shortage at this point.
Yeah, and it's something that is going to require a serious policy lift across the board at multiple levels of government and administration. But this is an encouraging story in terms of one school adopting an immediate solution to this problem. And as you noted, Sarah, you can't help but find parallels between this story and the one that we talked about a few weeks ago about how schools were developing their existing paraprofessionals into teachers. Sometimes when you have a shortage in staff or when you need your staff members to have additional competencies, the best place to look is right in your own school campus rather than necessarily opting right for outside hires right away. And this is a great example of that. If you already know that you like the people in your building and they've already expressed an interest in a particular skill that they want to build, why not train from within and develop from within with the people that you already know and trust?
Well, and students, particularly special needs students, really require dedicated staff that understand their needs, understand how to work with them. And to me, having paraprofessionals or teachers who maybe are gen ed teachers but haven't had special education credentialing, who already understand the community and the students, I think would make such better candidates to work with special needs students and students with disabilities because they already are aware of the extra, emotional burden that puts on a situation. The emotional wherewithal that you need to have is a real issue for why teachers are leaving those positions, right? So that's a lot of stuff that go on with students with disabilities, specifically maybe students who were not able to get the services they needed during the pandemic. And we're really working hard to develop and fill all of those services that didn't happen the way that maybe they would have in a traditional school year, in a traditional classroom. So, I mean, this is a very specific need. And I think, when we were talking before, I think we were talking about reading tutors, which is a really fantastic way to get people connected. But this time talking about special needs credentialing, I think that's really important. And it can be, I don't think people always realize how expensive it can be for teachers who have to get all of this education to be able to do their job. And we all know teachers don't get paid enough, right? So to have teachers who are saving year after year just to be able to get into a program, to get credentialed, and to have school systems that are willing to provide that for them. I mean, it's almost like a duh moment, right? Like, of course, this is what needs to happen. Of course, this is what we should be doing. It just makes such sense that these people who are already dedicated and know our students are in the best position to be providing these services for them.
It gets me back to an expression I like to say a lot on this program, in that this is a wheels on a suitcase idea. The first time I walked through an airport and saw somebody carrying or pulling their suitcase with wheels on it, I went, oh my God, that's such an obviously good solution. How did it take us so long to think of this? This seems like another one of these wheels on a suitcase ideas. Why not make sure that, encourage and train your existing talent to be able to serve this unique population of students? And while I think the challenge that it provides to schools is now you don't necessarily have to look outside your campus to find the people that you need because they're right there. But where you do need to look outside is finding the right partnerships with these third-party credentialing organizations, whether it's universities or other training nonprofits. You need to start building those relationships now, so they have a great relationship with your school and its campus, and that you partner with them to make sure that you have an efficient mechanism to get these fantastic staff members of yours trained. And that's going to be an exciting skill set to watch administrators and schools develop over time.
It is. Ryan, what did you want to share with us?
Really interesting story reported by NBC News. So in light of rising anti-Asian American rhetoric amid the COVID pandemic, advocacy groups and education leaders are calling for curricula that is more inclusive of the AAPI community. NBC News highlighted some of these efforts in a recent report. According to the article, New Jersey is slated to become just the second state to mandate Asian American history as part of its public school curriculum, following Illinois, who made a similar reform back in July. Advocates say that these education reforms are a valuable tool to combat pervasive issues that burden the AAPI community, including the model minority myth and the false belief that Asian Americans bear responsibility for the spread of the pandemic. These groups also espouse the importance of highlighting key events of anti-Asian violence and discrimination in American history, including the Chinese Exclusion Act of 1882 and Japanese American internment camps during World War II. In support of these measures, Asian Americans Advancing Justice Executive Director John C. Yang noted how the current U.S. racial reckoning following the police killings of George Floyd and the fatal shootings of 6 women of Asian descent in Atlanta shows the necessity of more ethnic studies curriculum. Quote, "We need to address all of this together, and Asian Americans want to be part of this solution, standing in solidarity with the African American community and other communities of color. Without Asian American education in schools, harmful stereotypes about Asian Americans persist." Now, Sarah, what I've heard from a lot of experts on this space when it comes to creating more inclusive curriculum of different minority groups is that these initiatives tend to work best when the content is integrated and multidisciplinary, not just this separate thing that you teach as a block and then you never hear from it again. These are issues that can be viewed from the lens of multiple subject areas. This means highlighting important areas of Asian American history in social studies classes, but it also means highlighting the work of Asian American authors in English classes. If you can make it a multidisciplinary approach and an integrated approach, I think you're going to see better outcomes here from what I've heard from experts.
Absolutely. It kind of goes along with something that I've said on the show before when we're talking about, Hispanic Heritage Month and Black History Month. It's not really effective and it's not really celebratory and inclusive if we relegate people to a month or to a category. This is when we're going to talk about this ethnicity and this race, and this is when we're going to highlight them. It should be integrated. A multicultural education includes integrating all of these ideas into every single discipline, as you mentioned. When students are not seeing representation, whether that's in the teachers and administrators of their school, whether it's on the actors that they see on television being portrayed in positive light, whether it's in their textbooks, whether it's in the novels that they read or in the posters that they see around school or in media, social media, then they don't have very good ideas of what positive role models look like, whether they are, whether they're white, whether they're of color. And it is detrimental not only to Asian American students, not only to Black students, it is detrimental to white students as well to not have that representation. And we have study after study after study that demonstrates that this is not just an idea that is helpful for students of color. This is helpful for all students.
Yeah, we've seen it in studies that show that white students that attend a school with a diverse racial makeup have better education outcomes, or if white students are exposed to teachers of different minority groups or administrators of different minority groups, that can lead to positive educational and just personal outcomes. So I think those same statistics would track in terms of the type of curriculum students of all races are exposed to. I think the Asian American case is an interesting one in the sense that when we're talking about how we develop this curriculum, from what I've heard from advocates here, is you really need to make sure that you take special care on the representation side to specifically highlight Asian American representation and not just Asian as the Asian diaspora, more generally. I've heard about this a lot in the music industry, where Spotify, for example, did a highlight of a spotlight on Asian American Month or Asian American and Pacific Islander Month. And the artists they highlighted were a bunch of K-pop artists and artists from Japan, Mando pop artists, but not very many musicians of Asian American descent. And I think there is a risk of similar things happening in the curriculum there, where teachers may feel inspired to, when addressing Asian American representation, show like Sun Tzu or Confucius or historical Asian culture, as opposed to the unique Asian American experience and the unique events that Asian Americans have experienced throughout their history. And so I think educators need to be cautioned to make sure that you are really also focusing on that second A in the AAPI when developing your curriculum.
And I think that's a really, well-meaning, I'm sure, teachers falling into that trap. But it's a very easy trap to fall into when we talk about any ethnic celebration or any ethnic conversation. And I know for a fact we had a whole segment on Black History Month maybe years ago. I don't remember how long ago it was, but we talked about the same exact thing, right? I know it blurs sometimes. But I know we had the same exact conversation in that do not pigeonhole people into one experience or one group, right? And so a lot of conversations in schools about Black History Month start with just only talking about slavery, right? And so we can't do the same thing when we're talking about Asian American Pacific Islander experiences. And also, Asia is literally billions of people and so many different cultures. So there is a difference between celebration of a culture, right? So if we're talking about Indian culture or Chinese culture, Japanese culture, and then talking about Asian American experiences in the United States. And so we have to look at policies and historical things that have happened and look at things today and why things are the way that they are in our country today. So there's a lot of layers there. And I think if you're an educator listening to this and thinking, oh, cool, I want to be more inclusive and I want to make sure that I'm doing that. Not jumping to just, okay, I'm going to talk about this. The first step needs to be with the adults in the room. And that's something I think we always have to recognize is well-meaning adults wanting to be inclusive can be damaging if they don't take the time to work on themselves as an adult and see, where are my blind spots? What do I not understand about this experience and this movement that I need to educate myself and the adults around me before I put this information in front of children?
Well, I know I want to get better at this stuff, and that's why I've been trying to listen to a lot of experts on this. And I know I still have a lot to learn. And so I would encourage some of the listeners out there, if this is an area where you've explored this, you studied this, maybe you've created some great curricular elements on Asian American studies that you'd love to share with us, let's make the sharing happen. Please reach out to us on social media at Academica Media with the hashtag Big Ideas in Education, and let us know what you think of our stories this week. Sarah, it's been a pleasure as always.
Same to you, Ryan. Thanks everyone for listening.
The views expressed on the preceding program have been those of the hosts and guests and do not necessarily reflect the views of Academica, its clients, staff, affiliates, or advertisers.